Welcome to The Network, a success podcast for nurse and healthcare consultants to learn the strategies and tactics to launch and grow a profitable consulting firm. And now for your host, Elle Pearson.
Hello and welcome to episode 7 of The Network. I'm your host, Elle, and I'm so excited to welcome you back to another episode where we help healthcare professionals interested in consulting learn the strategies to launch and grow a profitable consulting firm. Today, we have a very special guest on the show, and I'm so excited for you to meet my dear friend, Jennifer Michelle. Now, Jennifer is the president of Michelle Marketing Strategies, where she specializes in growing mission-based healthcare organizations. Helping people is her passion, and the company she works with shared that same goal. Jennifer's background is in public health and in epidemiology, and she also volunteers at her local rescue as an EMT. She is also the host of Leading with Health podcast, where leaders of healthcare organizations join her to discuss growth, change, and their vision for the future of healthcare. So without further ado, let's chat with Jennifer. Hello, Jennifer. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Hi, Elle. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. I am so excited to have you here with us today because if there's one question that I get often from my audience of consultants, it's how do I get clients? So I know that you have experience with building relationships with those that you work with. So I am excited to learn some strategies from you today.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. I always love your energy and how you dive into everything you do. So I'm excited to hear about your podcast.
Absolutely, Jennifer. I'm excited to have you here as well. So before we get started, tell me a little bit about what you do and the clients that you serve in healthcare.
Well, I help grow what I call mission-based organizations. And that means whether they're for-profit or nonprofit, they're really trying to help people feel better. They're trying to help make patients' experiences a lot better within the healthcare system. So sometimes that's a nonprofit that's working on a specific illness or a specific caregiver situation. Sometimes it's a medical device company. Sometimes it's a tech company. But I really like working with clients that have a passion for what they do, that they're not just trying to, tweak some, platform. They see their platform as really helping at a very base level of making somebody's experience when they're ill better. That's what's important to me.
Yeah, perfect. So it sounds like you're having to reach out and make a lot of connections yourself.
Of course.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're doing business with those organizations. So like Jennifer, I'm just curious to know, how do you yourself reach out to those large healthcare companies that you in fact want to do business with?
Well, it's interesting. I've been doing consulting on my own for going, I guess, a year and a half full time at this right now. And I've been marketing for 10 years. And so I've certainly had to do networking before, had to help other people do networking. And what I find is you have to play to your strengths. And for me, it's really talking with people. I really seem to be able to form bonds with people quickly when we're just having a conversation. So for me, my main tactic is to try and build connections on social media and get those to a point where I can reach out and say, hey, let's just chat. Let's finally meet. And from there, I find it usually leads to getting clients. And I don't mean that it's like every person I talk to. I mean, that would be an unrealistic expectation. But for me, that's what it really winds up being. So I've learned to reach out to my network and to keep very careful control of who I'm really adding into my network. It can't be just random because I need to, when I have time to do this, I need to be able to go there and see a list of new connections that I've made and know that they're really in the group that I'm trying to target.
That's so true. I feel like social media has really opened up, you opened up the ability for us as consultants to have direct conversations with those that we want to build relationships with. So that's a great suggestion. What's a platform that you use to make those initial connections?
For me, it's mainly Twitter and LinkedIn. And that is because the people I'm looking for tend to be on those platforms, but also it suits me. Again, you have to play to your strengths. I love looking at Instagram and I can help people with Instagram, but I am not especially visual in the way that I think. So it's a huge effort for me to constantly think of taking photos, and I can do it sometimes. And if you ever see me try, you'll see that for a few weeks I'm great at it and then I disappear. And so I need to, again, make the best use of my time. So for me, it's anywhere where I can reach out and get people talking. And Instagram is more, I think, if you have a visual connection and want to make connections that way with people. So again, it's just to your strength. And some people are really just wonderful at connecting with people on Facebook, and they have a good network. And in medicine, certain audiences are very active on Facebook. I think nurses in particular tend to have a strong presence on Facebook, and that can be very, very useful if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. I'm interested in Twitter. Now, I haven't per se used Twitter, to connect with a lot of those who I do business with, but I've heard of Twitter chats. Are you familiar with Twitter chats, and do you get involved in those conversations to connect with others?
I do. I don't do a ton of them. I have chosen one that I do pretty regularly because I think it covers a broad range of people and involves some interesting topics. I have been trying to find some other ones that are a fit for where I want to go. And the trick is always finding one that has the people involved that you're trying to target. And sometimes what you get are just other people marketing their services. And that, for instance, LinkedIn groups, I have found very often have people who are just shouting into the space and everybody shouting the same thing. So those don't work as well. But if you find a good Twitter chat, I think you can get some great conversations going with people.
Yeah, that's true. Going back to LinkedIn, I absolutely agree with you. I feel like sometimes you can join a group and everyone is advertising or marketing what they can do.
Yes.
So what I have found that's worked for me is not only being a part of that group and letting them know, who I am, how I can serve them, but also adding value. I feel like that's something that, maybe newer consultants may not know how to do immediately because you want to jump into that sale. But really just showing up and just providing tips or strategies or suggestions, that's been something that's worked for me inside of those LinkedIn groups. Have you found that to be effective, or the LinkedIn groups altogether?
I think it totally depends on the group. And I think what you're describing is exactly the way to do it. But I do sometimes find that there are certain groups where it almost seems like the organizations have assigned their marketer to post a blog post every week. And so it's the same couple of people posting, and it may or may not be useful, but nobody's interacting. Nobody's responding. Nobody's commenting. And I think if you're going to post something that's useful, you want it to be not just distributed, because obviously the people probably check the group occasionally and sometimes they're emailed out directly, but you want to know that it's a group where there are people who are going to actually respond. They're not just consuming. So I look to see, are people commenting? Are they not commenting? And that's just something to pay attention in any social media.
Yeah, that's so true. So Jennifer, my question to you is, in my group of consultants who are interested in, obtaining new clients, a lot of them may not have any previous marketing background. Do you have any tips or suggestions on how they can place themselves or where they can place themselves if they have no previous experience and getting started in the marketing world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really comes down to knowing what sets you apart. And it doesn't need to be something so unique that there's not a single other person on the planet who would meet those qualifications. But it's enough that whether it's in your location or it's in your area of expertise, there's something that would make someone want to use your services over somebody else. And that is something that is trickier, I think, to do than you think. And sometimes you think you found it. I thought I found it when I started consulting, and then it changes. And I think especially in the first year or two of business, you will find that it changes because you'll go like, wow, I could do that, but this is more fun. And I seem to be better at this, or I seem to be able to make more money when I do this and not that. So it will grow with you. But start thinking a little bit about what you bring to the table. Now, if I'm understanding your audience correctly, Elle, I think a lot of them are nurses, and depending what they're going to do, that in and of itself might be part of what sets them apart. But then their specialization might be, or their personal experience in certain things, or why they became a nurse might be, or how they combine that with their business expertise or a legal expertise, or whatever it is. That combination can be what sets them apart.
Yes, absolutely. And it's so true. I found my superpower to be, relationship building.
Absolutely.
Yes, it absolutely works for me. And, when we're in the business to help others, people have to trust you and like you and know you before they can buy into anything that you offer them. So I think, relationship building very strategically for me on LinkedIn has worked. But I've also recently found a passion for speaking, Jennifer.
Yes. Oh, I bet you are a wonderful speaker. I would love to see that.
Yes. Well, thank you. My nerves are a little worked up beforehand, but I always find that, even when you're sharing your expertise on stage, people will come to you at the end of that engagement and they want to know more about you. They want to continue that relationship. And if you've done a great job, they want to buy into what you offer. So I absolutely 100% agree with you. You have to find, your special niche and what works for you. So I agree with you.
Well, and so much of it is being true to who you are. You want to make sure that you are, in the end, you're presenting who you truly are, because that's what people are buying. If you're a consultant, they're buying you. They're buying, what it is about you that makes them feel relaxed, or as you say, like they can trust you. So you have to be showing not an image of what you think you should be, but who you really are, because that comes across as trustworthy.
Yes, that's so true. Jennifer, I'm interested in knowing, so once you have established that initial relationship, because it sounds like we both kind of have the same strategy when it comes to starting that conversation with some information, some valuable information, forming strategic relationships with those that we can better serve. Once you started that conversation, how do you transition into an offer to where you can work together?
Well, I go a little slowly with that. I am trying to, keep in mind always that people need to get to know you. People want to first learn what you do. They may or may not have a project right away. For instance, I also have a podcast, and I find that getting people interested in being on my podcast is a wonderful way for them to get to know me in a non-salesy manner. And after, like you and I, Elle, after we've chatted for a while, and then we have an interview together, this is how you and I originally met.
Yes.
This is, now we kind of know each other now. I would think of you, like if I found a nurse who wants to go into consulting, my first thought is going to be Elle. So that is kind of an early sales thing. When we do marketing, we talk about top of funnel to bottom of funnel. And the top of funnel is just connection and education. And it slowly goes down and down and down until somebody says, yes, I want to work with you. In consulting, that can take some time because, they might not have a project right away and you have to keep that relationship going. But I find what happens when they're really saying, yes, how would we do this, is you have to just listen. Listen to what they want, listen to what they're looking for, and then say it back to them so that they're clear that you understand it. Then what I usually do is, once we're clear that there's something specific that they need, and it's something, in fact, that, it's in my wheelhouse, then what I do is I get an idea from them of, what they want, and start saying, this is what I think, and this and this and this. And I then say, okay, I'm going to write up a proposal of what I think we can do, kind of a scope of work. And let's set up another meeting and we'll talk about it. Because I find the kiss of death is to just send a proposal out in the blue, because then people are looking at what you wrote and they misunderstand things. They get nervous of things. They don't understand what's involved. So you never want your proposal speaking for you. So number one, don't be in a rush to send it out. Have a conversation, have two conversations, whatever that needs. And then when you do send it out, say, well, let's meet next Tuesday at 3. By then I'll have this for you and we'll look it over together and we can tweak it and look at it. And that way, if it's too expensive, you hear that and you can say, well, that's okay. We can adjust this out of there if you can't do it. Or if they say, no, I didn't mean that. I meant this. You can say, okay, let me switch it. We could also do this. And it doesn't leave you as a consultant, hoping that you perfectly understood what they meant, because your clients and your prospects are not going to understand what they need in the same way you will. So that's a big, it's a big kind of hole that you can fall in. And I would never want a consultant doing that. I think we need to understand what it's like to receive our proposal. And what it usually is kind of confusing. So I personally talk people through that. And then once we say, yes, this is it, then I can feel comfortable because, it's scary sending out a proposal if you're not really sure if you got the amount right or you got all the different project parts right. And then to have somebody just say no. And I remember going through this when I started before I got a pattern in, and you're like, but I could have changed that. Why didn't they say anything? And the answer is they didn't know that you could change that. Even if you told them that, they got scared. So talk them through it and then finalize it together. And that feels much more interactive. Personally, for me, that also is how I work with my clients. It is it's very iterative and it's very interactive. So that helps me understand how I can work with them and helps them see you don't need to panic. You can talk to me. You can let me know what's working and what isn't, and we will keep adapting until you get what you want. So that's the process I use. And then I send a contract. And then here's another thing I learned this last year, a coach that I was working with. I do an onboarding process. So the very first meeting we have after we're all signed on says, this is how you can reach out to me. This is how quickly you can expect to hear back from me. This is when we'll meet. This is what I'll need. And it becomes an easy reference for everybody. I know exactly how to contact everybody. I know when we're meeting. I have all my logins. They know what to expect. It sets everybody's expectations. And I think that makes it much better.
Yes, absolutely. Jennifer, you said something even initially that resonated with me, and that's once you get on that initial call with your ideal client or your prospect, it's about listening. You have
absolutely
people to listen. And I know that I'm a talker. I want to tell you how you can solve all of your problems immediately. However, you really have to just take a backseat to the, dominating the conversation and really listening. Listening will open you up to so many more opportunities. And that way you can have a clear vision of, okay, this is what this client truly needs. And this is how I can move forward with serving them the best I can. So that's so true.
It's so true. And I'm a talker too, as you can see. So that's it's a trick to learn, like, okay, Jennifer, now this is when you listen, but it's the number one thing, especially because people use words differently and they conceive of what they need differently. And you have to listen really hard because sometimes they'll say something that is maybe something like a term that refers to something else in your mind, but that's not what it means to them. And you have to make sure you understand what it means to them. And you have to listen for any signs of nervousness or hesitation or confusion, because addressing those things helps build trust with you. And that's what you want them to do.
Yes, absolutely. It starts with trust. That's how you have a solid foundation with the clients you want to do business with. I agree.
Absolutely. It's the only way, because consultants are even if you grow to a larger, business where you have assistants and you bring on other consultants at the very beginning. And for those of us who prefer to be, a single consultant, you are presenting who you are. You need to be authentic.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So it sounds like, Jennifer, you have a lot of really great inbound strategies in place that you utilize, such as your podcast to bring in clientele, such as making connections on LinkedIn. Do you have any outbound marketing suggestions or tips for anyone who's just getting started in consulting?
I do, but I think they all flow together because social media is inbound, but then I actively reach out, which is outbound.
Mm-hmm.
And I have tried different email sequences, and I've sometimes found that they get a response, but they don't seem to work for me as well as when I reach out to a connection on social media. That's not true for everybody. I know other consultants who have great success sending out emails as a way of clicking with people. So I think you have to find what works. But I think emailing prospects, especially if you are selling something that is pretty clear to understand. Some of the projects I work on are, talking about a growth strategy doesn't hit a bell the same way I will set up your Facebook does. Mm-hmm. So if you're selling something where they instantly understand, like I know, Elle, that you work with physician reputation management, that is, I think, very easily understood. So that is something you could approach through email, I think, very easily. Mm-hmm. And I think that, doing that. And then the trick is, you follow up. You don't want to inundate, but people rarely respond to a single email. You're going to have to follow up. You might try leaving a voicemail. You might try messaging them on LinkedIn. You don't want them to feel stalked, mm-hmm. but you have to do it more than once. Usually, 7 to 9 times maybe of outreach before you put them in a tickler file and try again, maybe in 6 months. Yes. Something like that. Yes. But, there are a lot of different ways. There's phone, there's messaging, there's, all kinds of things. And some of it is even just at a conference. It's, speaking is kind of, well, I guess that might be more inbound, but you have to actively get a place that is inviting you to speak. So you have to submit a proposal. So I think they all flow together, but you need a mix. You absolutely need a mix.
Yes, that's so true. And when you mentioned follow-up, yes, that's something that I had to learn the hard way. We deal with clients or prospects who are very busy. Sometimes they mm-hmm. open that email with the intention to get back to you, but they may get busy in their day-to-day practices. So having a really strong follow-up sequence has really worked for me. Mm-hmm. 3 or 4 emails just won't do. So
it's very true.
Yeah.
It's very true.
Yeah.
And I think it's also, you have to remember that they see some random email and they might get, just delete that. But after you've even if they've just seen it and deleted it each time, after 3 or 4 times, your name is recognizable. And somehow that also gets people a sense of, well, I guess I know this person. They've emailed a few times. What really is this about? So that's part of what's going on their end. And we can understand that because I'm sure we all do that every day to some other vendor.
Yes. Very true. Very true. Well, we've talked about some really great best practices as far as marketing to our prospects. Any suggestions or tips, Jennifer, on some things that we just want to avoid having being new in selling our services as consultants?
Yes, I think there are 2 things that kind of spring to mind whenever anybody talks about like a marketing don't. Mm-hmm. And the first is, well, it's related to what we were saying earlier about listening. And that don't talk too much about yourself or your company, because nobody comes to you wanting to hear about your company. And in fact, by the time they're asking about that, it's because they're a little farther down the path. Like, yes, they want to know who you are and what you do, but they don't want to know how you work with your clients and the different tools you use and the different platforms you work with and the different things you can, provide them. They want to know about how you can help with their kind of a problem, which means you have to talk about whatever their problem is as they see it. Help them feel that you understand that, and that is what is going to lead you to closing that sale. That's another one. I think the other thing is probably, it's a hard thing. It's more of a sales thing than a marketing thing, but especially for consultants coming from a different world into their own business, it is very common for hopes to get really high when someone is like, well, yeah, I might want that. And you think, oh, wow, this is a really hot prospect. They keep saying maybe, and I should follow up with them. And you have to have a point where you realize that a maybe is really a no. Or it's such a slow yes that you should come back to it in a few months and not look at it right now, because it can be very easy to put a lot of time into trying to convert a prospect that really just is not ready to ever do that.
Yes.
And instead of moving on. In sales, you want a clear yes or you want a clear no. When you get in that hazy zone, you need to remind yourself that there are other people out there who do want your services and not lose all your time trying to work on a maybe.
Yes, that's so true. I never like to have to convince anyone that they need my services. I like you to already know and identify that pain point and how I can in turn help you solve that problem. So I absolutely 100% agree with you, Jennifer. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh, it's a classic sales one, but it can be really painful to learn when you're all excited and then it just fizzles. So we all have to go through it. It all happens. But.
Yes, that is so true. Well, Jennifer, I don't want to take up too much of your time today, but before we go, do you have a book or maybe an online resource that you would recommend to any consultants who are diving into marketing their solutions?
Well, it's funny because I was just reading this book and it is actually kind of a fun book, but I really found it useful. It's called Brag and it's by Peggy Klaus. And I think it's like the art of tooting your own horn or something. But she's this wonderful communication specialist and she has these wonderful techniques. And I did them all and it was really helpful. And it was about how to take the different stories in your life and make them into kind of like a memorable bio, or so that you can talk to people about what you've really accomplished in a way that's engaging and memorable, but not so braggy to be off-putting. And it was just fun. And she, this is what I love. It's always easy when these kind of books give examples of, how Bill Gates does this. But those of us starting out maybe don't have the resume of, Bill Gates or, or 16 Nobel Prizes or whatever some people have. And she's able to take people who, like most of us have a very interesting and useful background, but maybe have had a non-linear path. So someone who maybe took a couple years off to raise children or who is switching careers or something like that. So you find you can still bring your voice out. And for those of us who are very good at promoting others, but maybe not so much ourselves, which might be me, I'm just saying, it was very useful to find a way to pull that forward and say, okay, this is what I bring to the table. So and it's fun to read. So that's, you can't do better than that.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing that resource. I am definitely going to read Brag. Tell me the author's name again.
Peggy Klaus, Klaus.
Okay, perfect. Well, Jennifer, it was a pleasure speaking to you today. And for those of you who want to connect with you after the show, where can they find you online?
I am at michellemarketingstrategies.com. So everyone can find me there, or they can, if they're a fan of podcasts, they can look up the Leading with Health podcast.
Perfect. And you give a lot of great information on your podcast, Jennifer. I'm excited for that as well.
Oh, well, thank you, Elle. Thank you so much for inviting me on your podcast. That was really fun.
Yes. Well, Jennifer, thanks again. And I look forward to our next conversation. Take care.
Thank you. You take care too. Bye-bye.
Hold on before you go. If you need a step-by-step template to start your consulting practice, check out thenurseconsultantnetwork.com. Here you can learn about our membership academy that'll provide you with a roadmap to launch your consulting practice. Go to www.thenurseconsultantnetwork.com/join to learn more.
Thanks for listening to the Network Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you're ready to monetize your knowledge as a consultant, head over to thenurseconsultantnetwork.com and check out our free resources. Until next time.